welcome everybody. Joe is over in the arena talking to a number of the candidates, and he'll join us shortly. Meantime, I do want to bring in Sarah Fagan and Larry Kudlow. Now, Larry, I felt like you were almost down there on the stage. Your name was one of the first things Donald Trump mentioned talking about his tax plan.
Well, as you know, I have argued for a 15% corporate tax for a long time, and Mr. Trump nailed it in his plan, and I praised him for it. So that is true, and I would do it again. It's not exactly breaking news.
What'd you think about the debate tonight?
You know, it wasn't everything I hoped it would be, but it got a lot of it in. I mean, there was a lot of talk about tax reform, a lot of talk about jobs, a lot of talk about growth. It kind of went off center in a few places. We had some talk about immigration. We had some talk about entitlement reform. You know, I think everybody pretty much weighed in, so good.
Sarah, what were the biggest movers, you thought, in terms of tonight's debate? Who stood out to you? Who didn't stand out enough?
Well, I think the two senators did really well tonight. Senator Rubio and Senator Cruz had very strong nights tonight. I think, you know, if you look at Rand Paul, he really needed a moment. He didn't really get one. You know, I don't think John Kasich had a great night. He set himself up to really sort of take on Donald Trump and Ben Carson. And while there was one moment early in the debate, he kind of faded in the background. So those two did not have a great night, in my view.
I would, with respect, my friend Sarah, I would say Kasich had a good night because I felt he presented his approach to growth, which he wants a balanced budget. He made that very clear, but he also wants tax cuts, and he's done that in Ohio. And I think he made that case, and I think he was very alert and very strong. He took an attack from Donald Trump, but he survived that attack. So I'm going to give Kasich points. Look, what did I want? I wanted growth. I wanted growth and tax reform. I got it.
Hey, on that very note, let's get down to Joe Kernan, who's in the arena now with Donald Trump. Joe?
Yes, you're right. I am with Mr. Trump. You've done 3 of these now. This one's finished. Your impressions?
Well, I think everyone did a really good job. I was very happy with our, if you want to call it a performance, but it was terrific. And I really had a lot of fun. I thought it was terrific.
Who impressed you?
Well, I think, they're all people that I'm going against, but I think everybody did very nicely.
Do you think the right balance was struck between attacking each other and attacking who is actually the enemy, the Democrats?
Well, I thought that if you looked at Hillary's deal a couple of weeks ago, the questions were much softer, much easier, much nicer. It was like a giant love fest. That did not take place over here. This was pretty tough. But I would say that, you know, that's the way you want it to go. But Hillary's questions were certainly a lot easier than the questions we were given tonight.
There were 10 candidates. I think every candidate had some really tough questions. That makes it fair, I think, in the eyes of...
Well, I think so. I'm only comparing it to what Hillary went through and the Democrats. Now, maybe they negotiated a better deal than our folks negotiated. I don't know. But I can tell you that that was actually quite boring. I think this was more exciting. But these were much tougher questions.
And much more substantive, I would say, too.
Also more substance. I think so.
Was there enough talk about actual solutions or...
Well, I think you had a lot of ideas. You had a lot of different ideas tonight. While we're all Republicans and conservatives, I think you had a lot of different ideas and some really good ones.
I've actually asked, you mentioned Larry Kudlow in the debates, and I asked him earlier when we were doing the pre-show, do you think Donald Trump at this point earns more points being the renegade that you were at the beginning, or some people say you need to get more mainstream to become more palatable to establishment Republicans? I don't know whether you think about that. I think, are you always yourself, or do you?
I think I want to be myself. I want to be honest to myself. It's important. It got me here. As you know, I had the #1 position, and I want to keep it that way, and it got me here. So I'm certainly not going to change, but perhaps I'll tone it down a little bit.
So have you toned it down since the first debate?
Not trying to, I will say. You know, I'm very happy with the performance. I think that people like what I say. They agree with me, whether it's immigration and illegal immigration. It's become a very big subject, Joe. And I think if I didn't bring it up, it wouldn't even be discussed right now. And it's a very important subject to discuss. And my relationship with Hispanics is fantastic. I was in Miami the other night at Doral, and I had mostly a Hispanic audience, and it was an unbelievable love fest. My relationship with Hispanics is incredible. And one of the things I really want to do is I want to win, assuming I win. flip this and then run against Hillary, where I do very well against Hillary. I want to win with the Hispanics because I have a very special relationship with them and employ thousands of Hispanics.
Did you weigh in on the debt deal? It's going. I guess the House passed it at this point.
I've been watching what they're doing. They do it so easily, so simply, and it's so much money. And we're already at 18 trillion, but the 18 is already 19, and now they're going up to $20 trillion. They do it so quickly, so easily, without negotiation. I think they should be ashamed of themselves.
Then you wouldn't be in favor of this, wouldn't it?
I'd much rather see some cutting. I don't know why they have to always go. We're going to be up to $20 trillion. Right? Think of it, $20 trillion.
But if we don't raise it and the government gets shut down, doesn't it hurt the GOP?
I don't think you're going to have to do that. And you know, one of the biggest problems I see as somebody that thinks into the future, it's always like a one-week window. They start talking about it, as you know, and I watch the show all the time. You start talking about it all the time because of the pressure, about a week before it comes due. They should start talking about it like tomorrow for next year or for 2 years, because that's the kind of a deal you're talking about. They start a week before it comes due. No, they should have cut. They should have done a lot of other things. They approve it too fast, and it's too much money.
Last but not least, there are times when populism and conservatism are diametrically opposed. There are times when you tread on both, and I think it confuses some people. Could the TPP be done in a way where you would support it, where free trade would be opened up, we could reduce tariffs, free trade has raised a lot of people out of poverty?
Yes, but they have to put significant currency manipulation clauses into this agreement. The single greatest ripoff of our country is through currency manipulation by Japan, by China, by everybody, Joe, by everybody. It's the #1 weapon, and they don't even discuss it. So yes, but they have to talk about the #1 problem that we have, which is currency manipulation. And by the way, nobody does it better than China.
And what if they say back to us, you're unable to raise interest rates because you're worried about the dollar going up, you're holding your currency?
Well,
down.
I do not like seeing this dollar situation, because I will tell you, look at what's happening with Caterpillar and so many other companies right now. They're not exporting because it's so high. And you know, one of the things, I like a strong dollar in one way, but it's going to cause tremendous havoc with respect to trade and with respect to exporting. We are going to have a tremendous problem. Now, where it's good, if I want to buy something in Europe, it's fabulous. But I'd like to spend my money in this country.
You know what I'm trying to do? I think I can get this to 3 hours right now.
I know, you're just about there.
Anyway, thank you
very
for your
much,
time.
Joe.
You're going to come on Squawk Box.
We'll do it,
okay,
absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, Kelly, that's it from here. I'm looking around for anyone else. John Harwood.
Yeah, always looking to book
thanks.
the show, Joe. I noticed that. I noticed that. Joe Kernan there with Donald Trump. Appreciate it to both of you. Just a word quickly, guys, before we go. Sarah, Larry, anything you heard from Donald Trump there? Or again, just final thoughts about the debate tonight.
Well, I think Donald did not have a great night. You know, here's somebody who came in, has led every other debate. He comes in second place on this debate. I think Ben Carson is the leader of this race right now. And he really needed to contrast himself with Ben Carson. He didn't do that.
All right.
And he was flat.
All right.
I'm easier on Trump on this. Again,
Well, he praised you.
Cutting the corporate,
I know. And
cutting the corporate tax is a great measure. It's pro-growth, and I think.
I don't want to cut off the conversation, but we do need to let everybody know the season premiere of The Prophet is about to begin here on CNBC. We'll have much more though. If you want to get a second screen going with more debate coverage, Larry, Sarah are sticking around. We'll bring you that on CNBC.com and all of our partner sites. A very special season premiere of The Prophet begins right now.
I didn't.
All right, welcome everybody, and we welcome all of our new digital viewers to our coverage of tonight's GOP presidential debate. I'm here with Larry Kudlow and Sarah Fagan, so let's pick up right where we left off. Larry, you were talking about taxes.
Yeah, no, look, I think Trump got his message out very well on pro-growth tax reform. And, of course, I favor the corporate tax cut. I'm not as familiar with all the other details. I was interested, too, on immigration. He is very much in favor of the H-1B visas, what I call the brainiacs. Now, he said it has to be legal, not illegal. But that guy was pretty interesting, and I think he got his message across. And even though it wasn't on the economy, is answering guns interested me, that he would permit his employees to bring guns. I don't know that I've heard that before.
I thought that was an honest moment that he had. You know, most people, when they're confronted with something that's surprising to them, they kind of hem and haw, and he didn't. He right away answered. And that is what appeals to many voters about him. You know, I thought one of the strongest moments of the night was Ted Cruz had some of the strongest moments. Not only, of course, did he attack the questions, which isn't surprising. Some of these candidates don't like tough questions. But he had a great moment on entitlement reform. I thought he gave one of the more articulate and more passionate reasons why we need to reform entitlements to save them for seniors.
But what I loved was then when Marco Rubio, when it came up towards the end, and he said, you know, my mother's on, I think he said Medicare and Social Security, and I'm against anything that would hurt my mother. How does that play into this whole discussion?
The issue of entitlement benefits is the third rail. It's a hot issue. And you saw a pretty good discussion.
It was, yeah.
I would like to have done more on that. I mean, Christie basically agrees. And you're right, Cruz. I was surprised that Cruz was ready. But they have to be careful. And let me just add one point. The age limit is very important. But why not offer private accounts if you want it? Why not offer that?
For which piece of it? For retirement or for health care?
For retirement, particularly. I'm offering to have health savings accounts in Medicare, too. But I'm just saying, in Social Security, okay, make the reforms and benefit. If you and I want to do private accounts or younger people, let them do private accounts. Medicare is also tricky. I mean, look, Ben Carson basically was health savings accounts, and that's going to reform Medicare.
And Donald Trump, same thing over the weekend, said he thinks it's an idea whose time has come. The problem is anytime you start talking about health savings accounts, it's going to go back to the original savings accounts. It's going to go back to 401k accounts that people are supposed to be using to save for their retirement. And as you both know, every day it feels like a new stat is out about how we're not saving nearly enough.
Could we have a universal savings account to cover all of it? What do you think about it?
That's a great idea. It's the kind of policy ideas I wish I were hearing from these candidates. Something new. I mean, one of the frustrations for many conservatives is, yes, we are having policy discussions in some of these debates and on the campaign trail. So many of them are the same conversation we've been having for 20 years.
One of the problems, though, Larry, if you start to commingle all of these functions, they're critical to every person's life. We're talking about being able to pay for your retirement, just exist or survive during retirement. We're talking about being able to pay for your health benefits. If you not only establish, hey, it's up to you to make sure that you're funding these appropriately, but, oh, by the way, this is just going to be one giant pot of money, maybe you throw in education, too. Do you really think that's something that could be viable long term?
Look, it's a matter of choice. Can people do it? I think they can do it. It's an interesting thing to be pursued. I'm a little leery, I'll be honest with you. I'm a little leery about all this talk of cutting benefits. I'm just leery. And one reason I am is, you know, if I get you a 3.5% to 4% economic growth rate, you know what? Social Security is solved. Not Medicare, but Social Security is solved, and it would help Medicare a lot.
Nobody is talking about cutting benefits for retirees or near retirees, but people, my generation and Kelly's generation, we don't believe it's going to be there. We don't have any faith that the government is going to provide us with the Social Security that we've been paying into for all of these years. I hope I'm wrong about that.
Nor do we really have an alternative for it, but you do see different behaviors among younger generations who seem to have that sense of, you know, I better be more conservative with my finances just in case. By the way, we're starting to get now some of the sound from some of those key moments of the debate. Let's recall this heated exchange between Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio after Bush went after Rubio's Senate voting attendance record, or lack thereof.
Marco, when you signed up for this was a 6-year term. And you should be showing up to work. I mean, literally, the Senate, what is it, like a French work week? You get like 3 days where you have to show up. You can campaign or just resign and let someone else take the job. There are a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck in Florida as well. They're looking for a senator that will fight for them each and every day.
I get to respond, right?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Well, it's interesting. Over the last few weeks, I've listened to Jeb as you've walked around the country and said that you're modeling your campaign after John McCain, that you're going to launch a furious comeback the way he did by fighting hard in New Hampshire and places like that, carrying your own bag at the airport. You know how many votes John McCain missed when he was carrying out that furious comeback that you're now modeling it under?
He wasn't my
No, Jeb, I don't remember. Well, let me tell you, I don't remember you ever complaining about John McCain's vote record.
right, so what did we think about that exchange? What did it reveal to you about these candidates, Larry?
I guess you got to do it because it's a headline.
Which piece of it?
Any of it. Who cares? The voters decide. Look, senators have run for president forever and ever. And yes, they miss a lot of floor votes. Okay, we know that. Jeb's taking cheap shots. Frankly, I didn't think Jeb had a very good night on policy issues or anything else.
If you're going to challenge somebody, you better win the moment, and I don't think Jeb Bush won that moment. I thought Marco Rubio handled himself well. And I said in the pre-show, this is a big deal to me, largely because his home state newspaper has made such a big deal about it on the eve of a debate, or on the morning of a debate. He handled it well. I think that this issue probably gets behind him, and
I do wonder in a way if this issue is persistent with him, because there hasn't been a lot of other meat for people to go after with Marco Rubio. So you know what, his attendance record is there. It's an easy one to tally and to talk about in terms of his absenteeism. He's been asked about it a number of times, Larry. And he's given pretty satisfactory responses.
If I'm not mistaken, the Florida primary is not until March, well into March. All
March 15th.
So we'll see what the voters in Florida have to say. I think it's a non-issue. I would rather they were debating health care, okay? I would rather they were debating Obamacare replacement. I'd rather they were debating whole federal departments that we could cut in the budget because we don't need it. So no, you didn't win me. They didn't win me over on that at all.
I thought Chris Christie also had a very good night. You mentioned his comments on entitlement reform. He has a way of really dominating the screen when he speaks, and these debates have been good moments for him. He has yet to break out and break into that second tier of candidates.
Sarah, interestingly enough, you're right. I mean, he gets on there, he commands the stage, he's looking right at the camera, and his remarks were dead on a couple of the issues that weren't really getting enough airtime. So then he was able to kind of bring the discussion back to that. Why aren't his poll numbers reflecting, though, the success that he seems at least to be having in these forums?
It perplexes me, honestly, because, if you look back a year ago, he was the heir apparent. He was the guy that was going to be the nominee. And, of course, he had the Bridgegate scandal, which consumed a big part of the early part of this cycle, which threw him off his game. But, look, this race is very fluid. I definitely come from the establishment wing of our party.
Really?
I don't believe Ben Carson nor Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee.
By the way, you bring up Ben Carson. There's a name that we haven't talked about a lot, but Ben Carson continues to confound everybody's expectations in terms of the traditional establishment approach about what would work in this campaign, do well at the polls, Larry. He didn't say anything that I think hurt him tonight. What happens now?
I think he had a decent night. He defended his health care proposals. He defended his Costco association when they talked about the gay issues. In fact, I thought he was very good on that issue. And generally, he's a flat tax guy, and he defended that on the grounds of economic growth. I like that stuff.
Let's get back to the arena. Now we're going to bring in our John Harwood, Carl Quintanilla, and Becky Quick. Guys, Carl, you're hearing now the early reaction to the debate. It was feisty. You guys were attacked by some of these candidates. What do you make of it all?
I mean, look, we're here to light the fires. That's definitely what we did. I mean, the room was definitely engaged. Clearly, the role of the media has its place in the tone of the campaign. I thought some of the best moments came in the latter half. I mean, 3 to 4 straight minutes on Social Security and housing. I was proud we got that batted around, as Christie said.
Thank you.
Becky, as well, some questions there on Carly Fiorina's track record at Hewlett-Packard, which again was the subject of front-page New York Times stories this week.
Sure.
Did it feel like a moment where she was able to set herself up as the anti-Hillary candidate?
I think it depends on where you come from and what you're interested in hearing. I think it's really hard to step back and see exactly who hit things out of the park. I'd love to hear what some of the people on the sidelines thought. But look, what we wanted to do with this debate was make it half job interview and half really digging into the issues. And I feel like people really know these candidates better after this.
John?
Kelly, from what I could tell, the people in the arena loved what we were doing. I was feeling that warmth from them, but that's what happens when you have got to ask tough questions of members of their party. Some of the candidates on stage didn't like it, although some of the ones who went hard at us from behind the podium when we were talking afterwards, they were pretty jocular about it. So they realized, they had a job to do, and we also had a job to do. And to Becky's point, I think the last people who could judge, Kelly, the import of the debate and who won and who lost are those three of us at that table who were trying to keep the debate moving. You kind of lose perspective up that close.
Well, I suppose I shouldn't even ask Carl. Then I was just going to say, what did you think was the most memorable moment? So maybe I'll rephrase the question and just say, what do you think is going to be the biggest impact this debate will have on the cycle from here?
Hard for me to say. I personally thought Rubio delivered a really good performance. There were spaces in there where we didn't hear from him a lot, but he definitely came to play against Governor Bush. And I'll be fascinated to, as John says, we're going to read tomorrow's analysis just like you, because we are still working through it in our heads. But to me, Rubio's performance stood out in a way.
And I will say, I think he was successful. I think his game plan coming into this was to kind of lay low and not get into fights and spars back and forth with too many people and try and get a serious message out. And I do think he accomplished that.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so much. I know it's been a long and intense day. So that's Carl, Becky, John, right off the debate stage. Thank you guys all so much.
Thank you, guys.
And also fresh off the debate stage, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. And hey, the man who just wrangled Donald Trump afterwards as well. Joe, welcome back.
Thank you,
Governor, what did you think about the debate?
Well, one of the things that I think is very helpful is we talked about Social Security and Medicare. That's important because it affects every American. And I think the most substantive part of the debate was where we were able to distinguish what separates us. I mean, there are a lot of Republicans who think we ought to cut the benefits, means test, that we ought to really go after those benefits for 60 million Americans. I don't think that's not only I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's moral. I think there's a moral wrong to go after people who have paid in their money. This is not the government's money. It wasn't a contribution the government made for me. It was a contribution the government took from me. And I believe that was an important discussion. A lot of good points, but for me, that was, I think, a substantive part of this debate that was supposed to be about the economy.
There were several really good substantive parts. And for me, there were some rocky moments among the candidates, which I think that's one of the reasons, 20 million people are watching, obviously. But by the end, especially with some of the things you said and others said, it was like a big dysfunctional family finally coming together against what they see as that someone wants to do the opposite things for the country. And everyone said there's some talented people here. You can see the difference between us and them.
Right.
With all of our differences, the 10 of us would love standing here together in opposition to the policies of the other.
Well, I think we need to remember that the purpose of this whole debate is not for America to just enjoy a game show. It's not for them to enjoy a contest. If they want to see a great game, they can watch the World Series. But what they want to find out is who on that stage can lead this country? Who can lead? And leadership is not making a speech. Leadership is not just saying, hey, I introduced a bill. Leadership is the ability to actually do something in a very difficult environment.
But it's funny. That's exactly what entitlement reform in some ways is about recognizing that it's two bad choices. It's a choice between taking away an important benefit that people have paid for and a choice between trying to figure out how to reform the system so that it works for everybody in the longer run. How do you reconcile those two planks of this debate?
It's like asking me, how do I reconcile two friends? They're friends. The point is we have a moral obligation to provide those benefits because we took the money from the people. It is not an entitlement. It is not welfare. It is an earned benefit that people earn because they had the money taken out of their checks. So here's what I kept trying to point out, and I really hope we at some point have a much more substantive conversation about taking it from a different approach. Rather than how are we going to pay for these benefits, how are we going to look at why does it cost so much? You know why? Because we're a very sick population. And when 80% of all the healthcare costs are chronic disease, and when the big four drivers of disease are not being really addressed, we ought to say in the same way that we went to the moon in the 60s, we're going to go to the moon in a decade. We need to say within a decade, we're going to cure cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and Alzheimer's. Kelly, we do that. And we do change the economy.
And I was going to ask you to separate Social Security from Medicare, but you brought up something much more interesting for this last couple of weeks, which is what are we going to do to continue to support research and development for the drugs that are going to bring about those cures, while at the same time dealing with how expensive they are?
Part of the reason is because it's so hard to get a drug to market. The cost of getting there, the regulatory cost, and then the fact that it goes generic in 7 years, and if the drug company doesn't make enough in those 7 years to recover their costs, they're not going to research anymore. What if we set up a ridiculously generous prize, whatever, it's $100 billion tax-free if you find a cure to Alzheimer's? Do you think that would be an incentive to go do it? I guarantee you it would. Now, I don't know what the figure is.
Even if it was government money, or it would
Look,
be
the government is going to be paying out a whole lot more than that if they keep treating these diseases.
Yeah.
That's why I say, let's cure them. If we cure them, we will spend far less money. In fact, Alzheimer's alone will be $1.1 trillion by the year 2050.
Where do you stand then on the Trans-Pacific partnership that's being negotiated that still has to be approved, but that includes some changes in how American-developed drugs will be protected overseas, but also made available to other markets? As you know, a lot of these markets are basically taking the research and development that American companies have done, the cost of all of that, and then delivering it at a much lower cost to their population.
Well, I'm for the reimportation of drugs, and I said that 5 months ago in a plan that I put out about letting those drugs come back into the market at market price. But I don't like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because what we're going to do is once again empower a lot of trading partners who won't keep their end of the deal. We're expected to keep ours. We've seen 5 million manufacturing jobs leave this country since the year 2000, 60,000 plants close. The trade deals haven't worked. We've got an $11 trillion trade deficit. So until we know how to police our own trade deals, we darn sure shouldn't be getting in another one. And frankly, I wouldn't trust Barack Obama to negotiate the purchase of a couch off Craigslist, much less to operate a trade deal with 40% of the economy of the world. No way would I ever acquiesce to that.
Joe, I was going to let you, jump in there and vehemently defend free trade and all that's done.
I'm for free trade, Joe, but it ain't free if it ain't fair. And if both parties aren't playing along. My state was one of the largest state producers of steel, and I saw what happened when China dumped huge amounts of steel into the United States illegally, violating the trade deal, and we did nothing.
You know the old line. I think it was Ricardo, or one of those economists, maybe 18th, 19th century, who said, the candle makers would love for us to blot out the sun. In other words, there's always going to be winners and losers. That's a dynamic economy, and you have to have the confidence, right, that it will still churn out those new sectors, those new jobs, that innovation that's curing cancer and doing all of these things, even while acknowledging that some people are going to lose out in that process.
It's not about losing out of the marketplace. It's not about losing the marketplace, though, Kelly. It is about when the government wears, instead of a striped shirt, they're wearing a team jersey, and they're picking the winners and losers. And if the government doesn't police their own game, then the game's going to get completely out of control, and that's what's happened.
We don't want to import price controls, Kelly, believe me.
Import price controls?
Yeah, if we're going to re-import drugs, we don't want to import price controls. And here are also they don't develop drugs where there's price controls anymore.
Don't.
We develop them here.
We do all the R&D here. None of the R&D is done in China, and none of it is done in Japan.
Stuff, didn't you?
No, I did.
Yeah, you didn't. I thought you did.
I did. I didn't know where you were going with that.
All right. Well, you're talking about, I Love Lucy, so I don't.
David Ricardo, the great.
That Ricardo. Of course. I thought Ricky Ricardo. All right.
I don't think so.
No.
Governor.
You knew what you were talking about?
I'm sorry?
Nothing.
Creative destruction.
Yeah.
That's the point of this discussion. It's having that faith. And actually, that's one point we were making earlier is, are there enough candidates who are expressing that faith, that optimism, that confidence in the American economy to keep creating those new jobs, new industries, even if some regions, some factories, some parts of the country are going to suffer as a result?
Part of the reason that our economy suffers is because we don't have the kind of raw capitalism that is great. Look, I'm a capital C capitalist, but what I'm not is a crony capitalist. When the government is playing this game of rewarding the donor class with special deals in the tax code, that's why it's 77,000 pages. That's why I still favor the fair tax, because it eliminates the influence that all this lobbying has on manipulating the tax code so that some people get a break, but small business owners, they take it in the backside because they can't afford somebody up there lobbying for them to get their special deal.
So where does that leave a Governor Huckabee on the Export-Import Bank?
Well, I don't think it's a necessary part of building the economy of America. True capitalism doesn't need that particular entity. And some of the strongest conservatives in the House and Senate clearly are the ones leading on getting rid of it. I don't think it's the biggest issue in the world, but frankly, I think we can get rid of it, and it's one more way to get the government out of the market system.
Yeah, fair enough. And Governor, thank you so much for joining us up here.
Great to be with both of you. Thank you,
Really
Kelly.
appreciate
Thank you,
your
Joe.
time.
Thank you. You are welcome. Thank you.
Several powerful exchanges between our CNBC panelists and the candidates tonight. Here's what you missed.
Should the government be involved in controlling some of these price increases?
Instead of, picking on this group or this group, is we're going to have a major reduction in the regulatory influence that's going on. The government is not supposed to be in every part of our lives, and that's what's causing the problem.
Do you want to get Congress involved in monetary policy, or is it time to slap the Fed back and downsize them completely?
Loose money is one of the major problems. We need sound money, and I think the Fed should get out of the business of trying to juice our economy and simply be focused on sound money and monetary stability, ideally tied to gold.
More than half of American workers have no access to an employer-sponsored retirement plan. Should the federal government play a larger role in helping to set up retirement plans for these workers?
No. The federal government should not play a larger role. Look, every time the federal government gets engaged in something, it gets worse.
On that note, I think here we're going to bring in our debate panelists, Jim Cramer, Rick Santelli, Sharon Epperson. Guys, if you can hear me, it's great to have you back with us. And Sharon, I would just ask for your early reaction to tonight's debate.
Well, I think that the candidates were able to touch on an issue, of course, that is of great importance to so many people, and that is Social Security. But I was also glad that at least we got a response from one of the candidates about what they do about the other part of people who are struggling to save enough to have financial security in the future, and that is with their own savings. And she said, no, the federal government shouldn't help set up retirement plans for a lot of these freelance workers in this freelance economy. And that was quite interesting from Carly Fiorina. It's interesting also because her opponents, some of them, have come up with plans that would offer retirement plans for smaller businesses and help the government get involved, like Senator Rubio as well as Governor Bush.
I'm Scott Cohn at CNBC Global Headquarters. A little bit of issue with our feed from Boulder, which we'll get back to in a bit. We want to talk a little bit, though, about what our Fact Patrol has been up to throughout the debate. Donald Trump said toward the end that the Nabisco is closing a plant in Chicago and moving it to Mexico. Not true, according to the company's CEO. The plant is staying open, but Nabisco is moving 300 jobs from Chicago to Mexico. Trump's been critical of the H-1B visa program to bring in skilled workers, and particularly critical of Marco Rubio. So Becky Quick asked him about it.
About Marco Rubio. I think you called him Mark Zuckerberg's personal senator because he was in favor of the H-1B.
I never said that. I never said that.
No? Well, let's take a look at Donald Trump's website. Mark Zuckerberg's personal senator, Marco Rubio, has a bill to triple H-1Bs that would decimate women and minorities. Maybe Trump didn't speak those words himself, but there they are on the website. Now, Becky followed up a little bit later, and Trump said he is in favor of legal immigration. He didn't address those comments about Rubio. Of course, the H-1B program is legal. It's become a standard feature in every debate to ask Donald Trump about his record of bankruptcies at his Atlantic City casinos, 4 of them. Again tonight, Trump characterized them as smart business.
I never filed for bankruptcy, but many, many people did. What happened with Atlantic City is very, very disgraceful. Now, hundreds of companies I've opened. I've used it 3 times, maybe 4 times.
Okay, first, let's clear up whether Donald Trump himself filed for bankruptcy, because the Fact Patrol has been going through all of the cases dating back to the first one in 1991. No, Donald Trump has never personally filed for bankruptcy, but as the sole board member and in some cases the lone shareholder, we got his signature and his name all over the filings, all over at least 3 of the 4 filings. The last one in 2009, he was no longer the majority shareholder and actually was a minority shareholder. So was it smart business? Well, it probably was smart for Donald Trump, who through each bankruptcy was able to get himself out from under the big personal bet that he had made in Atlantic City beginning in the late 80s. But each bankruptcy had thousands of creditors. Many were made whole, but many others were not. Let's move on to a clash early on between fellow Floridians Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio over Rubio's Senate voting record, missing nearly half of his votes. That was called into question earlier today by the Florida Sun-Sentinel. Rubio says other candidates were far worse.
In 2004, John Kerry ran for president, missing close to 60 to 70% of his votes. I don't recall the Sun. In fact, the Sun-Sentinel endorsed him. In 2008, Barack Obama missed 60 or 70% of his votes, and the same newspaper endorsed him again.
All right, let's check all that out. Rubio also said that John McCain had a worse voting record during his 2008 presidential campaign. The facts, according to an NBC News tally, John Kerry did indeed miss more than 65% of his Senate votes during the 2004 campaign. And John McCain also had a worse record at nearly 59%. There's Rubio at 47%. And President Obama, the best of the bunch, at 30%. Here are a few highlights, more highlights from tonight's debate.
She's 15. He's a good look at her analysis of.
Folks, we got to wake up. We cannot elect somebody that doesn't know how to do the job. You got to pick somebody who has experience, somebody that has the know-how, the discipline. And I spent my entire lifetime balancing federal budgets, growing jobs, the same in Ohio. And I will go back to Washington with my plan, and I will present it within 100 days. And it will pass, and we will be strong again.
Mr. Trump, 30 seconds. First of all, John got lucky with a thing called fracking, okay? He hit oil. He got lucky with fracking, believe me. That's why Ohio is doing well. And that's important for you to know. Number two, this is the man that was a managing general partner at Lehman Brothers when it went down the tubes and almost took every one of us with us, including Ben and myself, because I was there and I watched what happened, and Lehman Brothers started it all. He was on the board, and he was a managing general partner. Okay. And just thirdly, he was so nice. He was such a nice guy. And he said, oh, I'm never going to attack. But then his poll numbers tanked. That's why he's on the end. And he got nasty. So you know what? You can have him.
Okay, let me respond. First of all, Ohio does have an energy industry, but we're diversified. We're one of the fastest growing states in the country. We came back from the dead. And you know what? It works very, very well. And secondly, when you talk about me being on the board of Lehman Brothers, I wasn't on the board of Lehman Brothers. I was a banker, and I was proud of it, and I traveled the country and learned how people make jobs. We ought to have politicians who not only have government experience, but know how the CEOs and the job creators work. My state is doing great across the board. And guess what? In 2011, I got a deal in agreement with the board that he tried to take credit for 4 years later. It's a joke.
And Rick.
There's
all right. Our thanks to Scott Cohn for picking up out there at headquarters. We're back in action, so let's get back to Jim Cramer, Sharon Epperson, and Rick Santelli. Rick, I was just asking you about the Fed and what you thought about the candidates' responses to your questions.
Listen, we're not supposed to opine and get involved in the discussion, but let me just say this. There was very little they said that I would say I disagree with. I mean, that's the way I talk on CNBC every day. That's my wheelhouse. I don't know if they can actually deliver. I can't even imagine the way the market is so, tight, wound tight, and likes to be led and likes to kind of know what's around the corner. Can you imagine if a headline popped up that Congress is deciding to tweak the charter or whatever, what the markets would do? Now, can it actually be done? I'm not sure. But I think the candidates hit on some real gold with regard to the Federal Reserve. And I'll leave you with one notion. Who's minding the mint? I mean, let's face it. It's not like there is oversight, and it's very difficult to have oversight. But they are pretty much on their own. And the experiment of getting us to Mars is now going to switch to trying to get us back.
Well, speaking of which, Jim Cramer, I don't know if you heard our discussion with Governor Huckabee, but we were talking about the issue that you raised about, what happens when you have drugs that are helping to cure cancer and some of these really tough issues, but that cost a lot of money. Were you satisfied with the responses to your question, Jim?
Well, I think these are subtle issues. It's very hard when you're running for president to actually consider the pros and cons. The government's not bad. The drug companies aren't bad. The patient is needy and wants to live. And these are just difficult issues. You have to be a little Solomon-like. I don't know whether Gilead, which is the case in question that I'm thinking, if everyone who had Hep C were cured by their pill, which their pill does work, it would cost about $225 billion. So the question is, who should pay for it? Who can pay for it? What should the government do? And these were something that I thought that Dr. Carson would uniquely want to challenge and talk about. And he totally punted. So I don't know what else you could do. I mean, you ask a question that is really like, okay, so nobody's bad. No, I love the drug companies. They're on my show all the time. Those guys do a great job with R&D. I don't want the government to go bankrupt. I don't want people to die. These are complicated issues. I wish they would view them with a little more sophistication and be willing to deal with the hard issues, and not that this guy's bad or the government's bad, because there's nobody bad. They're just trying to figure out how to pay for it.
Right. Jim, Sharon, Rick, all raising key issues. So thank you so much for joining us this evening.
All right, good. Jane is still here. Jane's some long hours. She's had some reaction from some of the students we were talking about earlier, watching the debate. Jane.
Guys, prepare to be surprised. We spoke with 7 University of Colorado students who were at the debate about who won, who lost, and I finally point out at the end the one person none of them mentioned and their reaction to that. Listen. Joseph Soto, who won the debate?
John Kasich won.
How come?
I think he had the most sensible policy agenda, and he was reasonable and down to earth.
What in particular did you like?
I like his ideas around treating drug addiction and the drug epidemic in this country. I think it makes the most sense, and if you look at the data, his plan works better than any other plan that's been presented.
Who lost?
I think Ted Cruz lost. Well, I mean, he didn't act like a president. I think, when we're in an age where 10-second sound bites claim media the day after a debate, acting like he did just doesn't do anyone any favors, certainly not him or his campaign.
Dylan Kaiser, who won the debate?
I think, in my opinion, I'm coming in with a blank slate. I really like John Kasich tonight.
How come? Did you know anything about him?
No, I didn't. I was in the dark, but he said a lot of stuff that really appealed to me. And it sounds like he's done stuff before. I need to go home and really look at him to see if he has done some of the stuff he said, but it made a lot of sense tonight to me.
Who did not make sense to you?
I think maybe I was looking more for stuff from Jeb Bush, and I don't think he delivered really anything to me or appealed to me, really.
Thank you. Jacob Torres, you're next. Who won?
In my opinion, I'd say Ben Carson.
How come?
I really enjoyed his composure while he was on stage, but I was really interested in what he said about the 15% tax rate. That was of high interest to me. So,
did the math add up for you? Did he make it make sense?
Not going into it. I didn't really look into it before the debate, but that's why I am interested to see what he comes up with in the future. So,
who lost?
In my opinion, I would have to say Rand Paul, just because he didn't get that much time on stage, and it just generally wasn't too much of a competitor.
Thank you. Emily Gallegos.
Yes.
Who won?
Marco Rubio, all the way.
Why?
Yeah. I think he's really asserts himself as a leader, and I appreciate his humble background and that he talks about Social Security and Medicare and about his mom. He cares about his mom. That's important.
Who lost?
Rand Paul isn't assertive as a leader, I don't think at all, and he didn't get a lot of airtime, but he kind of isn't very straightforward with his ideas and his political beliefs, so I don't think he won.
Emily, thank you. Bobby Reedy, who won?
I think Governor John Kasich won this debate not because of some of his talking points, but because of his word and his consistency throughout the campaign.
Who lost?
I don't know. I feel like a few of the candidates didn't stick out. Ted Cruz, Mike Huckabee. They're just some people complaining on stage that they feel like the media is out to get them, but they didn't really stand out to me.
So this whole candidates going after the media thing, which played very big on social media, how did it play to you in the audience?
I thought like the booing was not necessary. I felt like it was not a civil conversation when people started getting personal and blaming the media on some of the questions. I feel like some of the questions maybe should have been focused a little bit more and fact-checked, but I feel like the responses weren't as fair as they could have been.
Thank you. And finally, Jolene Najjar, who won?
I would say Carly won. She stepped up and showed what she did wrong and how she overcame her adversities. And she also talked about fixing the basics, which I really liked. It's like a kid in school who doesn't know the basics. In math, he's not going to succeed. And so our government won't succeed if we don't fix the basics.
Who lost?
I would say Chris lost. Every time they questioned him,
he's now Chris too. He's Chris. He's on first name basis.
Yes, he definitely lost because every time they asked him a question, he would bring it back to the Democrats. The Democrats did this, the Democrats did that, and Hillary Clinton did this, and she's bad at that. And he wasn't showing why he was good. He was just showing why other people were bad, which I did not appreciate.
Guys, not one mention of Donald Trump. Not one mention of Donald Trump. What the heck? So who has a feeling about Trump?
I just don't take it very seriously anymore.
I can say something. So my name's Maddie, by the way, and I'm also a student here at the University of Colorado. I think that Donald Trump has some good ideas, but I thought that the question about him being like a cartoon character was a fair question, although I don't know if it was the right setting to ask that when there's such limited airtime. But sometimes it's hard for me to understand when he says things are nasty, like he called some of the questions nasty, but really Donald Trump can be nasty, so I don't understand why he can give it but not receive it. So that was kind of questionable for me, but overall, I mean, I wouldn't say he necessarily stood out in anything, which is why none of us mentioned him.
Isn't that amazing, guys? I just thought what a diverse set of opinions, except John Kasich, I guess you would say, is the overall winner.
Well, I don't know what struck me, Jane, but this is a liberal school, and every one of those students picked a Republican as the winner. Did you notice
it's almost
that?
Like it was only a Republican debate tonight.
Okay, all right, it's a fair point.
Yeah.
Fair point. No, that was good. Yeah, they're smart, and they were paying attention too, and that's good to know.
Great. They were great.
Yeah, that's excellent. All right, well. We've got, I think right when Dr. Carson sat down, one of the students was saying that Dr. Ben Carson won. So fresh off tonight's debate, let's bring in Dr. Ben Carson. I don't know if your IFB was in quickly enough, but yeah, you were just sitting down. I was going, hurry. Anyway, Dr. Unflappable, you are very even-keeled, and I saw that again tonight. You're not going to get rattled, are you?
It would be pretty difficult. But that has a lot to do with being a pediatric neurosurgeon.
It does. And I've said that people get nervous sometimes when they come on TV, and I go, we've never lost anyone. We've never taken out the wrong kidney. We've never been unable to stop the... I mean, it's not going to... There's no reason if you've separated conjoined twins to get too uptight, I would say.
Well, it was funny. A couple of weeks ago, I was on The View. Joy Behar said, are you frightened coming in here with all these women? I said, I'm a pediatric neurosurgeon. I can show you what frightening is. This is not it.
Joy Behar would still frighten me. No. That would.
I was going to ask you about health savings accounts. If that's all right, Doctor, because it's an issue that I know you've recently been supporting, and that Donald Trump as well this weekend was saying he thinks it's an idea whose time has come. But as we were saying earlier, there are a lot of Americans who say, wait a minute, we can't even save for our retirements appropriately. Now we're going to do this for health care and everything as well. Talk a little bit about how feasible this is.
Well, recognize that as a country, we spend twice as much per capita on health care as many other countries do. We put a lot of money into it. I would use the exact same dollars to fund health savings account. The difference would be, instead of that money going to traditional health insurance, where there's a lot of waste and bureaucracy, it goes into your health savings account where you have control over it and you make decisions with your health care provider. That money goes a lot further that way, and you give people the ability to shift money within their HSA within their family.
So it would be akin, it sounds like, to what happened with retirement benefits, which is that over a period of many, many decades, they've moved from being a defined benefit, which is you get X, to a defined contribution, which is you get to contribute this and we're going to try to match it, but it's ultimately up to you to get this right. Is that the idea?
Well, you don't have to match it. If you're getting the same monies that were going into your health account before, you don't have to match it. You can if you want. It's unlimited, the amount of money that you can put into it. But quite frankly, you only need so much money. As you get older, you may need more. And that's why, I've suggested that with Medicare, people who are wedded to Medicare, they can stay in the Medicare program. People who are not can go to the HSA/Medicare program, because we're talking about $600+ billion, and you're talking about 48 million people. $12,500 per person. You can buy a pretty fancy health insurance account with that.
Doctor, how much people have pointed out, you make the point that we spend more here. How much is that is based on lifestyle issues here, obesity, diabetes, drug addiction?
A lot of it is. And that's one of the reasons that HSAs work so well. Because
you're in control.
You're in control. You recognize that if you do this, it's going to take money out of your HSA.
And how much of it is money slipping through the cracks of government-administered programs?
Right.
Think about it. And if you owned it, you'd be less inclined to, plus you've got no accountability in a three-party system. The doctor doesn't know how much the drug costs, the insurance company doesn't know which one. There's three different people. None of them know what they should be paying for services.
And it works particularly well for the poor with Medicaid, because the Medicaid budget is very, very substantial.
Yeah.
$400 to $500 billion, and you have 80 million people involved. That comes out to $5,000 per person. Now, think what you could buy with that. Most concierge practices cost between $2,000 and $3,000 a year.
Right.
And you still got thousands left over for your catastrophic insurance, which is much cheaper now because almost everything's coming out of your HSA. So that gives those poor people an opportunity now to go almost anywhere they want. They're not second-class citizens anymore, and a lot of the health disparities go away.
And I raise it because it's kind of a new idea that's getting more credence, and by the way, becoming more popular because of Obamacare. People can't afford their deductibles.
Oh, yeah. But it'll be so much better than Obamacare. No one will want Obamacare.
But where in your sort of priority list, if you would, does this kind of issue fall? Is this top of the pile for you?
It's early on, because, we have to provide a very good alternative for Obamacare. I would never withdraw something without having a very good alternative for it. And one of the things that's going to help our economy tremendously is getting rid of the employer mandate.
Yeah.
Because, people stop now. When they get to 40, 45 employees, better put the brakes on. And that's the backbone of strength of the American economy.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Ben Carson there to elaborate on a lot of the proposals that we've heard this evening and in the last couple of weeks. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's get down to Eamon Javers now, who's inside the arena. Eamon?
Yeah, hi, Kelly. You guys are talking to Dr. Carson there, and so much attention in the run-up to this debate, including from me, on this whole question of Dr. Carson taking the lead now for the first time in a national poll over Donald Trump. A lot of us were wondering whether we were going to see Carson and Trump really critiquing each other. Instead, we hardly got any of those moments in the debate. The real controversy here was between Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush, not something that was necessarily expected going into this. The two Florida politicians going after each other. Remember, Jeb Bush is sort of senior to Marco Rubio. Rubio, in some ways, a little bit of a protege of Jeb Bush early on in his career. Tonight, though, the tables were turned. Jeb Bush came in with a prepared criticism of Marco Rubio, suggesting that he ought to show up in the Senate and vote and do his job. But Rubio obviously prepared for that line of questioning, and he hit back hard with the response. Here's what he said.
Well, it's interesting. Over the last few weeks, I've listened to Jeb as you've walked around the country and said that you're modeling your campaign after John McCain, that you're going to launch a furious comeback the way he did by fighting hard in New Hampshire and places like that, carrying your own bag at the airport. You know how many votes John McCain missed when he was carrying out that furious comeback that you're now modeling it under?
He wasn't my
No, Jeb, I don't remember.
senator.
Well, let me tell you, I don't remember you ever complaining about John McCain's vote record. The only reason why you're doing it now is because we're running for the same position, and someone has convinced you that attacking me is going to help you.
And that line there is just so cutting to Jeb Bush. You know, Marco Rubio suggesting that Jeb Bush is really enthralled to his handlers, political advisors, other people who are convincing him to attack Marco Rubio tonight. You've got to feel coming out of this that Marco Rubio is getting some momentum now going into the rest of this presidential campaign. The question is going to be going forward, who else got a bump tonight? Was it Chris Christie? Obviously, we're talking about Marco Rubio. Carly Fiorina got such a bump after the last debate. Did she get the equivalent bump here tonight? She had a number of good lines that were well received here in the hall, Kelly, but I think you've got to say that Rubio is the guy who's going to come out of this with the biggest boost overall to his campaign.
All right, Eamon Jabbers with a recap there for us. Eamon, thank you so much. Let's bring in Las Vegas businessman and reality TV star now of Pawn Stars. You've heard of it. You know Rick Harrison. He's joined us here on the network before. And by the way, he's publicly endorsed Marco Rubio, so welcome back to the program, sir. And you must be feeling pretty good about his debate performance tonight then.
It looks like he's won 3 in a row, so I'm really happy for him.
Kind of like Joey Logano in NASCAR, but I digress. What is it about Marco Rubio in terms of his policy, in terms of how he would be president, that most appeals to you?
Well, basically what it is, I mean, I've worked with, I own a pawn shop in Las Vegas. I've worked with poor people my entire life. And one of the main reasons people are in poverty is because it's the whole education thing. And I mean, that's the main thing I love about him. He wants to bring trade schools back to this country. You have people like Jeb Bush who want to do, Common Core Light, or whatever he wants to call it, where we have every high school is exactly the same, and we teach every kid to go to college, and then over half the kids don't go to college, and they get out of high school and they can't get a job because they're not prepared for it. We need all that back. We need that in this country. We need plumbers, we need machinists, we need electricians, and they're not learning any of that in high school anymore.
And I wonder, just going back to this crowded field, Rick, and your support for a guy like Marco Rubio. I mean, do you think a guy like Jeb Bush needs to stay in the race, or would it do better if he could throw his support and his supporters behind a guy like Rubio right now?
Well, I mean, at this point, I mean, his current currently it's attack Rubio, and that might help him. And I'm just telling you, attack politics rarely work. No, I mean, the field really needs to be thinned. I mean, we have. I mean, like the guys in the first debate, I mean, most people, 90% of the people in this country don't even know their names. We need to, it's tough when you have a debate like this when you have 10 people up there. You really don't get to the heart of a lot of matters. So there's a few people that need to go away and just get behind Rubio.
Rick, is your business inelastic or elastic? In other words, you do better in bad times, better in good times, good in both times? Where are we right now?
Well, that's a fallacy that a pawn shop does bad and does good in bad times. I mean, when the construction business was crashing in Las Vegas, it's no good if I have people lined up with construction tools and no one to buy them. So a good economy is generally good all the time. I mean, when the economy's great, I have a hard time getting merchandise. When the economy's bad, I have too much. So it can be argued that in the pawn business, there's never really a good economy for me.
So how would you characterize what you're seeing right now? And I don't know. I don't know if Las Vegas if we can extrapolate anywhere
Las Vegas
else based on what happened.
Las Vegas is doing really well right now. Construction is back, convention business is back, casinos are doing well, and I have my pawn shop. It's the #1 non-gaming tourist destination in Las Vegas. So I'm not your normal pawn shop, so my business model is a little bit different.
Do you base the interest rate you charge on the 10-year? You charging 2% now, or?
No. And that's, they talked about the Fed during the debate. I mean, it's, that's a big concern I have of mine. I mean, you can't have zero interest rates forever. Eventually, something's got to give. I mean, the low interest rates caused the crash the last time. And something does need to be about the Fed. We just have this oligarchy that sits over there and makes all the rules in the world.
But we don't need 40% either, like you're charging, Rick.
Yeah, but my average loan is right around $50 though, so it's a different world.
All right.
Actually, I went out to Rick's shop not long ago. Remember Rick? And I had him assess a few of my belongings.
Yeah.
An old book was one of them. My college ring was another. The drop in gold prices, Rick, it's killing me. That college ring was only worth, $100 or something.
Well, gold's up a little bit in the past month, so it might be like 105.
Yeah, but then look at the Fed today. They did nothing, and it was kind of moving lower. We've got some analysts who are concerned about now maybe, I don't know, maybe it goes back below $1,000 an ounce. What do you say?
Oh, well, no. I mean, it's in, let's face it. For the one thing that's been worth money for the past 5,000 years, it's gold, and it will be years and years from now when the dollar doesn't mean anything. But I tell people invest in gold because it's a great insurance policy. Put maybe 5% of your savings in gold and hope it doesn't do anything, because if it goes to $10,000 an ounce, everything else has gone to hell.
And just in case Marco Rubio doesn't win, right?
I think he did great tonight. I literally think I'm not just saying this because I really like him. I think he won the debate. I sit around, I was listening for substance, and there wasn't a whole lot of it from a lot of the candidates.
Yeah. We thank you so much, Rick, for joining us this evening. Really appreciate it. That's Rick Harrison, star of stage and screen in downtown Las Vegas. Quick update on the AOL.com poll we showed you earlier. Tax reform is still the top issue that viewers say they want the candidates to address, with almost a third of the vote. You can see 29% there, followed by jobs and unemployment and health care, Joe. But it's so interesting, and Larry loved this. He was saying, look, everybody cares about a tax reform. We got to get it
followed
done.
by immigration.
Yeah.
Did you say immigration? Oh, I thought you skipped
Did I skip that one?
I don't know. It was like Freudian. That was like a Freudian slip.
Let's get back to CNBC headquarters for another candidate fact check with our Scott Cohn. Scott?
All right, Kelly. Carly Fiorina compared Hewlett-Packard, where she was the CEO, to the federal government, a big bloated bureaucracy. And she says at HP, she made tough decisions to fix the company and grow revenue and jobs despite the collapse of the tech bubble.
It was a very difficult time. However, we saved 80,000 jobs. We went on to grow to 160,000 jobs, and scores of technology companies literally went out of business, like Gateway.
But Carly Fiorina failed to mention that the job growth and the growth in HP's revenues came almost exclusively from the highly controversial acquisition of Compaq Computer. She also doesn't mention that HP's profit, not its revenue, but its profit, fell. And in retrospect, buying a company that specialized in personal computers was not the best investment at the dawn of the smartphone era. Jeb Bush had a lot to say about his fiscal record as the governor of Florida.
My record was one of cutting taxes each and every year. You don't have to guess about it because I actually have a record. $19 billion of tax cuts, 1.3 million jobs created. We were one of 2 states to go to AAA bond rating, and our government spending was far less than the spending in people's income.
Now, Bush did cut taxes by $19 billion, according to state budget documents. There's some controversy there about how you count it, but the budget documents say that. And a big chunk of that cut came from the federal estate tax cut when his brother was president. Yes, Florida's economy boomed while Jeb Bush was in office. He came into office at the start of the housing boom and left just before it went bust. Florida did achieve a AAA bond rating during his time in office, but it joined 8 other states. It was not one of just 2. Our Fact Patrol is still on duty into the night. Lots more to come tonight here on CNBC.com and tomorrow on CNBC. Guys?
Thank you, Scott.
The GOP debate wrapping up about an hour ago. According to our CNBC.com vote poll, viewers think Donald Trump won the debate. Back in the spin room with us is Jimmy Petrakoukas. I'm going to do Jimmy P, but people think you're like a basketball coach or something, or someone who's really connected. And it scares me because I don't want to make you mad. Or a professional gambler or something. And it's good to see you. Thank you for coming here.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Do you have insight that we haven't shared yet with our viewers from Yahoo?
Well, I did briefly talk with Mr. Trump as he left the stage. Yeah. And I think a big question is whether or not this time around. We saw that as the verdict from his last debate performance. And this time he told me there was no fade. He said it twice for emphasis, and he said that's for sure.
You know, he didn't try to monopolize the debate either. And I think our moderators tried to give everyone kind of equal time, and they didn't focus just on Trump as much as some of the previous debates.
Well, he was very unhappy with the moderators. He said they gave a cakewalk to Hillary Clinton at CNN for the last debate, and this was much tougher. I'm a journalist. I think that's actually a compliment to you guys, but Donald Trump was not pleased.
I can't believe CNN would give a cakewalk to a Democrat. Has he got any evidence for that? Sarah?
Comment.
no, it didn't have to be about that. I'll go out on a limb there. You don't need to join me.
It was a good debate because it was the first time we saw sparring between these candidates. And to winnow this field, these candidates are going to have to start to draw contrasts with one another. And we haven't seen much of that in this race yet. Jeb Bush did it with Marco Rubio. I think Marco Rubio probably had the better moment there, unfortunately for Jeb. But Chris Christie did as well. I thought Chris Christie was very strong on the fantasy football. It's sort of an odd issue that's getting a lot of play. You know, the average sort of male sports fan who doesn't cover politics is paying attention to the story. And so if they were tuning in tonight, they saw Chris Christie basically come out and say, why are we even talking about this? Why should we regulate it? If there's insider trading, who cares? If you, Sarah, want to spend $5,000 a day on daily fantasy, go right ahead. The government has better things to do than worry about fantasy football leagues. What'd you think, Jim?
I think we've covered the fantasy football. I'm not going to go back into that. I think what we saw in this debate is one that a smaller group would be better. Also, we saw that when it's a lot of people, it's very difficult to sort of launch an attack and come from behind like Jeb Bush tried. He really tried very early to go after Marco Rubio. I think it did not work.
Now? I mean, what happens to his
This was supposed to be right. This was supposed to be like the turnaround that he was going to show that that he was strong, that he was going to make a comeback. It didn't happen. He was collapsing in the betting markets. Rubio was surging. Is it 3 strikes you're out? I don't know. He has $100 million in the bank. I think he's going to wait for the first two guys, Carson and Trump, to eventually collapse. But then you have Ted Cruz, who I think is just hanging around. He's right there. I think a strong performance. I mean, my winners would probably be Rubio, Christie, Cruz.
Hunter, that goes back to your remarks about Trump. And does he need to continue to just almost shock and awe people in order to see his numbers respond?
Well, I think Trump, in his own way, even though he is in second place, has his back against the wall. I mean, he said in Sioux City, Iowa this weekend, you know, second place is terrible for me. And it is, because he's premised so much of his argument on the idea that he's number one in the polls. He's also relying on a bit of an earned media strategy, where by being number one, he gets on TV a lot. He doesn't really have to buy ads. So I think with Trump, we're going to have to see whether he's willing to pay for his own ads when he starts to fade a bit.
And then there's
That's a good question.
And Sarah, when we talk about John Kasich, I don't know if you guys caught it. Jane Wells did a great piece a few minutes ago. She sat down, she polled a bunch of students who had been watching the debate here on their campus, and John Kasich's name came up over and over again. If he does get a boost out of this debate, how does he run with it?
Well, what he's got to do is win New Hampshire or at least exceed expectations in New Hampshire. He doesn't have much of a play in Iowa. He was doing quite well in New Hampshire about 6 weeks ago. He has faded. He's dropped back. But he could emerge. I do think this race is very fluid. You know, we are getting. Go ahead.
Impressing all the liberal students at University of Colorado will be a huge bonus for the establishment conservatives.
I will say that in my interactions with Democrats, I get the impression that they're most afraid of Kasich and also Rubio, who had a great night tonight. I mean, I agree that Christie's fantasy football moment was big, but Rubio had a ton of breakout
Kasich
spots.
reminds me of Bloomberg. The Democrats look at him and almost think, I mean, they may be having a little buyer's remorse that they've settled on Hillary Clinton, too. They look at Kasich and almost think, there's a Republican I could go for. And I don't know whether that...
Well, there's a little more room on their stage.
Yeah, but I don't know whether... Yeah, there is, but I don't know... Yeah, right. I don't know whether that endears Kasich to establishment Republicans if Democrats like him. I don't think it does.
Well, I didn't say they like him. I said they're more afraid of him and Rubio.
I know you said I don't see it
But,
that way. I think that
but he does appeal to a broader audience, which, you know, right now we're so focused on this primary. And all of these attacks on the media tonight, I mean, they're very popular with the base. That's ultimately a bad general election strategy. It never works.
Well, it's bad to attack CNBC, but attacks on the mainstream media are pretty relevant.
It's popular with the base. It doesn't work.
Yahoo.
It never works in practice. It doesn't actually help you get elected.
Right. It's fun.
Jim?
It's fun.
Yeah, it is.
I think we also had, when these guys did kind of talk policy, I thought it went really great. I mean, obviously I would like more. That's my bias. Yeah. But when they did, they actually started talking about their ideas, and there was that
Jimmy,
back and forth.
At the end, when Huckabee said, look, there's 10 people up here that are all serious. We're here for a reason. And they kind of came together. This dysfunctional family that it started out with, at the end, they all kind of said, you know what, we're here and we're different than who we're.
It was like a very special episode of the Republican debates by the end.
Exactly. I thought so too. I thought so. Teary.
A little bit.
Moving.
Yeah.
Anyway, are we really done?
We're
I think
done.
we are.
That's
all right. Thanks, guys and gals.
Thank you so much.
That does it for us. If you'd like to watch the Republican presidential debate again in its entirety, that's what I'm going to do. You can watch it now on CNBC television. Our thanks to everyone for watching, and to all of you. That's you. You do it.
No,
you
you're saying it best
you
for
end
both of
it.
us.
You end it.
Seriously, thank you, everybody. The debate begins again right now on CNBC.